We're cold opening this video because there's nothing funny about what I'm about to talk about. So based on recent events, it's become clear that maybe we as a country, and specifically maybe we as young people, as Gen Z, are not collectively as progressive as maybe the media and as like the general consensus for the trend of young Americans really portrays us out to be. And while I say that this has been highlighted through recent events with the recent election, this is something that I've been seeing and I've been thinking about for a long time. And actually I've been going back and forth whether or not I wanted to make a video talking about this topic, especially as someone who talks a lot about Gen Z culture and subculture. But yeah, I think I dare to say that Gen Z is beginning to lean more conservative than that of millennials. And we need to talk about that because I think there are a couple of reasons why this is, and specifically how this came to be when we talk about the normalization of conservative values, standpoints, and beliefs within Gen Z men specifically. Now, before I begin, I do want to make a quick disclaimer because I know the nature of this video is going to get fiery. We're going to break down this video by talking about the commonly held beliefs from like a media point of view, from like the general consensus point of view of what Gen Z has historically believed socially and politically. And then we're going to try and break down what really has happened to specifically Gen Z men for the first part of this video, talking about how a lot of young men have gone down the alt-right pipeline, and as well as getting into how young women and Gen Z women have gone down a similar pipeline to hold more conservative beliefs than what has previously been thought to have been the case. Now, I'm disclaiming all this to say this is not meant to be a call out or any like man hating or like woman hating, and I don't want to see any of that in the comments. This is more so a call in for Gen Z as a whole to start having conversations about how we got here, why we got here, and where we can go moving forward, now knowing what we know about where the country is going to be going for the next 4 years. Now, with all that said, we are here. We do have another 4 years of a Trump presidency, and that is spooky. Also, disclaimer, I do want to point out that when I'm talking about these things, they do widely apply to everyone in young Gen Z, but specifically this is more so geared towards non-Black Gen Z men and women. Because as we've seen from exit polls from the most recent election, those are pretty much the demographics of people that we've seen that really did swing more conservative voting wise in this year's election. Although culturally and socially, I do think that this is more so true across the board. Now, I'm gonna be honest, this is very different from my typical content. I don't typically do political commentary as much, but I feel like since this is something that has to deal with Gen Z, and I talk about Gen Z in social commentary a lot, and in light of everything that happened with this election, I need to talk about it. So if you are new around here and enjoy this kind of content, this is not usually the norm, but if you want to see other forms of Gen Z content analysis, Gen Z social commentary, pop culture analysis, TV and trends, be sure to hit that subscribe button, leave a like on this video, and to follow me on my socials at Imurgency on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. Also consider becoming a channel member to get exclusive access to every single one of these videos early, as well as getting 2 additional channel member exclusive videos a month. And before we get started, I want to take a minute to talk about this video sponsor, Oslo Sleep Buds. Sleep Buds are Oslo's science-driven one-stop shop for the best sleep of your life. Now let me get real serious about this. Y'all know I don't play about my sleep and about my ASMR. So you know that sleep and sleep quality are really important to me. And when I tell you that these Sleep Buds from Oslo are changing the game, they kind of are. Let me actually grab them for you for a sec. These are little sleep buds right here, and they are designed to block out sleep disturbing sounds and replace them with pretty much anything you want. You can put on soothing white noise or other background sounds through the Oslo app, or you can use them as normal earbuds and stream whatever you like on them. These are great because they're made with side sleepers in mind. When you put them in, you'll see that they fit right into your ear and don't protrude out, meaning that sleeping with them in on your side does not cause any discomfort or feel like they're like plunging in your ear. Like, hold on. You see this? You see this? Comfortable. So for my ASMR lovers, white noise lovers, or anyone with roommates, Oslo is here to help you get some better sleep. Thanks so much, Oslo, for partnering with me. If you're interested in getting some of the best sleep of your life, you can click the QR code on screen, click the link in my description, or by using the code EMER at checkout to get $10 off your pair of Oslo's Sleep Buds. Thanks again, Oslo, for sponsoring this video. Let's get back into it. Now let's talk about some of these commonly held beliefs about Gen Z that have been proliferated, had been commonly believed to be true, or at least generally true for what Gen Z thinks about the world, socially and politically, at least in America. Now, this is an issue for both Gen Z men and women. I feel like collectively, Gen Z across the board is becoming more so conservative. We're gonna focus specifically on the Gen Z men in this video, but again, there definitely is a lot of conservative content that women fall into as well. Thinking about some aspects of the sprinkle dating content, thin is in diet culture, and the trad wife and coquette trends and lifestyles, like those definitely also contribute to some of the pushing of conservative viewpoints and beliefs. But in this video, we're talking about the men because the men really did their big one. this election, and not in the best way. So prior to the last year, honestly the last 6 months, Gen Z has sort of been seen and described by the public as being this progressive young force of energy who really care about things like climate change, social issues and equality, diversity, equitable healthcare, and bodily autonomy. Now, in the recent past, with general sentiments and voting history, this has been the case, and largely still is to a certain extent, with the majority of young people siding with more progressive policies in politics. We saw in the 2020 election, 60% of voters aged 18 to 29 came out and voted for President Biden, with 65% of specifically Gen Z coming out to vote for him. And we constantly saw in the news about how the Gen Z and the youth vote was really pushing this like blue wave of progressive politics and politicians, trying to usher in this new era of politics that was sort of a rejection of the typical conservative beliefs, politics, and talking points. Now, with this most recent election, the 2024 election that we all just lived through, we actually saw Gen Z numbers go down quite a bit, with only about 54% of young voters coming out for the Democratic Party as of recording this video. Of course, this is based on exit polls, and those numbers are still updating as more votes are being counted. But as of filming this video, 54% of young people voted Democratic this election. And that's more than a 10% decrease from 4 years ago. And the decrease in this support is wild, considering that the opposing candidate for both of these elections has been the same person. And the second time around, he ran on a more extreme version of his original platform, which holistically went more against the typical Gen Z values than in the past election. And now, while the reasonings behind this are plentiful, and people have pointed fingers in many different directions for why this happened and why Trump has won the presidency again, whether that be things like vague descriptors of like the state of the economy, the G side in Gaza, not really vibing or liking Kamala, or whatever reasons that really resonated with young voters. Regardless, people had their various reasons for why they did not vote Democratic in this election. And I do want to clarify, because this is a lot, the rest of this video is not going to be a political breakdown or analysis of this specific election, but more so a case study into a few specific groups of the electorate that contributed to this election outcome, and more so has been a growing community around the younger generation, and that is the state of Gen Z men. And when I say Gen Z men, and when I'm talking about men for the first half of this video, I'm more so talking about white men. Now, hold on. I know that probably triggered some fight or flight in some of y'all, but hear me out. This isn't a hating video. I'm not here to hate on anybody. I'm just here to explain. I'm just here to chat. But there have been numerous articles written over the past couple of years talking about the rise in general male rage and discontent across the board, but specifically amongst Gen Z and Gen Alpha, with more and more young men acting increasingly misogynistic, in some cases generally bigoted, and holding more conservative beliefs and viewpoints than their women or queer counterparts.
Y'all are getting real excited about the man versus bear conversation.
So a lot of times people ask me what I'm pointing to or where my research comes from when I make predictions about politics. It's you. It's you all. I think a lot of you really underestimate how much unfettered access social media gives us to demographic research. A lot of people think that when I make observations about culture and politics, it has just to do with politics alone. No, a lot of other things are indicators of political affiliation. For almost every single video where I see discourse happening back and forth, I'm not just checking for the comments. I'm swiping almost at least a dozen to 20 profiles to see who's commenting what and why. So for instance, a lot of people cite my video about how plus size fashion disintegrating this year is an indication of a rise in and fashion. But a lot of people cite that video as kind of like a really good prediction. But what a lot of people do not often stitch is the video I've made after it, which was in reply to a comment, which is that white women should watch their children for an obsession with thinness and fitness. And particularly if they are finding this inspiration through social media platform, because those are usually pipelines to the alt-right.
And I think a lot of this is because this behavior is promoted and emboldened based on the content and the circles that young men are brought up in and basically encircled around, and in some cases incentivized to stay in because of this alt-right pipeline that exists online. Like, y'all remember last year when teachers were complaining about how kids didn't read, and like an offshoot of that conversation were how these young boys were increasingly misogynistic and rude to their female teachers and classmates, even though when these teachers brought it up to their parents were even shocked that they were exhibiting these behaviors. In some cases, you can blame parents for teaching their kids to be bigoted and teaching their kids to have these more conservative beliefs, but oftentimes, especially with the Gen Z and Gen Alpha and the younger generation, a lot of this, I'm going to put in quotes, indoctrination, comes from the online and peer spaces that young men are brought up in. And this is something that I feel like just now really getting the spotlight that it deserves, because we're seeing the impacts of this now in real time. But I feel like young, specifically straight, and oftentimes white men have been progressively red-pilled in our society through the media and content that is consumed and out there right now. And I'm sure it hasn't helped that a lot of these behaviors and ideologies have been normalized and emboldened by prominent political figures and pundits in the real world as well. And again, we've seen this play out in the real world when it comes to this past election, because we saw an increase in general male votes for Trump, but also more specifically and a little bit more alarmingly, an increase in the youth male vote for Trump. And I want to break down for this next section of the video what exactly this alt-right conservative pipeline is online for these men, and shine a little bit more light of how we got here. I'd argue that generally a lot of what's been going on in male-centered spaces has kind of been ignored by the main media outlets and the general pop culture zeitgeist, because everyone online lives in their own bubbles, and generally the types of energies and ideologies that these male-dominated spaces really breed and foster, especially recently, have been really intense and in some cases toxic. So I feel like for a lot of people, they've kind of pushed that group to the side, kind of relegating them as like the incels of the internet, or like this other out group that you just really don't want to engage with, which is completely understandable. But I feel like because it was kind of left on its own for so long, these alt-right spaces were really able to flourish. And I think we're seeing the impacts of that now. According to data from Gallup and the Walton Family Foundation, they found that Gen Z teens are twice as likely to identify as more conservative than their parents than millennials were 20 years ago. They go on to say that it suggests a generational shift. And while I'll argue in this video that this push for Gen Z not being as progressive as we claim to be applies to both Gen Z men and women, a quote from a Newsweek article states that it's typically reflective of the gender split, where it's mostly young men who are becoming more conservative and mostly young women who are not. And again, not saying that this is the be all end all, but looking at the exit poll numbers of this last election, you can kind of see that, where men by and large voted for a more conservative party than women, although for white men and women across the board, the percentages were shocking. Gen Z women weren't as heavily skewed. Now, I will say this before I break into this pipeline and before I start analyzing how we got here, I do want to say first and foremost, I am not asking or encouraging anyone, especially black women, to feel bad for or to feel sorry for anyone that got caught up in this pipeline or anyone that is currently in this pipeline, because the really real thing is that the results of the actions taken by people that have fallen into this pipeline, into this belief system, people that choose to align themselves with these ideologies, have caused and will directly cause harm to essentially everyone else in the country. So I'd never ask for that. I wouldn't even do that. And that's not the point of this video at all. This video is really just trying to shed light on and trying to explain how and why things have panned out the way that they have, so that we're able to mobilize and try and see a path forward in 2026 and 2028 to get the correct information in the right way to the people that need it most. Now let's talk about this alt-right pipeline for men. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. I think usually when people think about the alt-right pipeline, you know, this has been a thing that has been talked about for a while. Like it's been a thing. And there have been multiple videos of men speaking out against the alt-right pipeline online and talking about how they almost fell into it and how they got out. But I think for the general public, when you think of like this alt-right pipeline that exists online for these men, you think of people intentionally making these choices to learn more and more about this ideology and fall more and more in love with it, digging deeper and deeper into the intricacies of these spheres. But in most cases, especially when it comes to younger people, these pipelines have become a lot more covert in the way that they gain new people and gain trust and beliefs of these young men. And this may be preaching to the choir, but I do want to give a quick baseline for like how this usually starts. It usually starts as something seemingly innocuous, you know, initially preying on usually white men's insecurities, anxieties, and fears as a young man or teenager. That being masculinity, money, fitness, and social standing, both within other men and within their dating pool with women. And this is because men, particularly straight men, and oftentimes straight white men, have expressed feeling left out in a lot of circles due to needs not being met into being in the age of the woman, seeing how it's no longer enough to be rewarded with the world's spoils by just being a straight man in society, and seeing that you actually have to work on yourself as a human being to earn that value. And then you see the whole misogyny and misogynoir come in, where often cases these people are seeing and women winning being the focus and coming out ahead because they're putting in the work, they've put in that work, and are getting to / have gotten to a point where the generalized need or reliance on men has lowered to record numbers socially. And I know I keep harping on this, I know I keep saying this, but I think this alt-right pipeline, although it can affect a lot of men, I think that it does impact white men a little bit more. And again, we've seen that with the way that people have voted. And I think a lot of this can be attributed to the evolution of like incel culture, with generalized incel culture moving out of the typical like basement dweller, chronically online Redditor that doesn't have many real life social interactions due to their beliefs that the world and women are out to get them, and have moved on to more public facing and overt audiences of men. So now instead of incel culture being strictly relegated to people that are inside their house where you don't typically see them, or you can like tell when you're looking at an incel culture has more so migrated outward to the everyday man to different degrees. And you can see a lot of this messaging. And while it may not be inherently so in your face, it definitely is still there and we see it. And we can really see it, especially in a lot of the messaging in male content spaces. One popular influencer, Hasanabi, tweeted something about this, basically talking about how it's very difficult to avoid the alt-right conservative pipeline as a man on the internet because these values, viewpoints, and virtue signals / dog whistles proliferate into so many male-dominated online spaces and touch almost every single interest online, which to a certain degree is definitely true. Like, let's break into fitness. Like, fitness has been a big trend for male audiences online, and the fitness sphere has taken a huge boom, especially since the beginning of the pandemic in 2020. And while there is a lot of great and innocent fitness content online, there also is a lot of fitness content that runs on the narratives spun around things like revenge bodies, basically getting fit in spite of an ex, or making these transformations to either get more women to like them, or to show like an ex or a situationship, or like insert a random woman that affected them at some point in their long distant past here, which in my opinion breeds this like bro culture and ultimately breeds this woman hating culture within these spaces. Like, if you're constantly seeing content around gaining this revenge body to get back at your ex, or in spite of your ex because she broke your heart, she doesn't deserve you, that inherently creates some resentment towards women. Like, you're doing this whole fitness thing not for your sake, not to look better, but because you are anti a certain woman, which then can lead you to be just generally anti-woman. It really normalizes these outlooks and general belief system that it shouldn't matter what girls think or feel, and what really matters is the opinions, values, and beliefs of your fellow man to keep you afloat, which we've seen not necessarily pan out in the favor of these men. See the male loneliness epidemic, for instance. So not only can these fitness spaces breed certain levels of misogyny, the fitness sphere can also breed certain levels of fat phobia. And if you look historically, extreme fat phobia leads down an inherently alt-right conservative pipeline and belief system. And when I'm saying this, I'm not talking about general fat phobia. Like, that already is not great, but this is like extreme fat phobia, like where it's no longer pretending to be about like health, but now it's more so for aesthetics and having a certain look, like being able to look a certain way to have social value and social currency, creating very much an in-group and an out-group, what is desirable and acceptable and what is undesirable and unacceptable. And men are definitely not the only ones that are guilty about this. And while we talk about how women have fallen into this as well, we'll talk about the thinness in movement and how that is historically tracked to more conservative times. Then there's the whole content sphere within the manosphere around getting girls, dating, and general desirability. Now, this one I feel like is more so prominent nowadays. Like, it only takes you a few scrolls on Twitter or TikTok to see that the state of dating discourse online, especially for Gen Z, is garbage. And again, this isn't something that just appeared within the last year or two. This has been something that has been brewing for a very long time, especially within male spheres that, in my opinion, have progressively moved men's values, especially in dating, to be more so conservative. For a lot of Gen Z straight men, this stemmed from watching an abundance of how to get girls content on social media during the early teen years, where young male teens would be exposed to these alpha male strategy YouTube videos, essentially promoting traditional gender roles and normalizing a level of misogyny and hypermasculinity that is toxic, encouraging young men to take on these attitudes, to become an alpha and to gain respect from your fellow man and also from women, really creating this male-centered approach to dating with women. With a lot of the content and tips around that time focusing on disrespecting women to get them to like you and to fall in line, to insinuations that women don't really know what they want, and that it's a man's job to show them what they really want, further implying that women can't think or advocate for themselves and their own needs, which again is very misogynistic. And all this online content came before 2016, before Trump first got in office, that emboldened a lot of people to have these beliefs and foster these beliefs. Like, this has been going on for a while. And again, if you've been tapped into any of the dating discourse online, you'd see that a lot of these talking points, a lot of these beliefs, while they may not be one for one the same, in some cases they are, different iterations of them are still being used as discourse, as tips, as talking points for what's wrong with dating in this generation. With the messaging continuing to evolve and continuing to further the gender divide within Gen Z, specifically when it comes to dating. You have the what do you bring to the tables, the you have to embrace your feminine or masculine energy of it all, just all fully on display right now. And you see a lot of this discourse play out in real time on things like podcasts, even on the Pop the Balloon show. Like, that is such a great sociological example and where we've gone and what we value in like dating nowadays, because a lot of the points that people say when they're talking about what they're looking for in a partner and what they're not willing to accept in a partner have been leaning more and more conservative and traditional in their values. You have more and more Gen Z people advocating for traditional values in relationship. And I think a big issue that people have been running into is that people say that they want traditional values, but they themselves don't act in a traditional manner. But regardless, this whole concept of like moving back to traditionalism does lean more towards conservative talking points and beliefs. And again, this goes for both sides. You have some women saying that they're really looking for a provider, looking for someone to lead and be in control. And on the flip side, you have men talking about how they're looking for feminine women that will let them lead, stating things like they're looking for someone modest, someone that doesn't do too much. Basically having these dog whistles against having these strong, independent, opinionated women that we've been seeing absolutely kill it over the past couple of years. Well, a lot of people that have these beliefs aren't saying it out loud. This is a direct rejection out of all this because that threatens the whole concept of masculinity, threatens the whole concept of this machismo, misogynist rhetoric that also is one of the main talking points of like traditional conservative viewpoints, meaning that the woman needs to be subservient, needs to be modest, needs to not be as opinionated and just to go along with what things are being said by the men. And then on the flip side, for women, for men, the need for this provider, these sometimes seemingly unrealistic expectations for what a provider really means in terms of monetary compensation and stability. All this to say that in reality, this frustration with dating for men, Canon has a lot of them down this pipeline of like disliking and hating women, either overtly or covertly, only really respecting, acknowledging, or giving the time of day to like the good ones that they believe to be, which again is problematic. Then the last part of the pipeline for men is the money and the get rich quick of it all. I feel like this pipeline especially was seen with the outcome of this election and a lot of the talking points for a lot of young people and a lot of men when it came to this election, talking about the economy. I've personally seen a major movement into the alt-right pipeline when it comes to money, when it comes to getting rich quick content, because a lot of these financial freedom, get rich quick content verticals oftentimes are male leaning and oftentimes are very manipulative in the way that they advertise and pull in people. Like they advertise things like financial freedom or never having to work a day in your life if you just do these steps and work in this way. All of them basically resolving around capitalism and oftentimes around exploiting people, like the whole home flipping debate, like the whole Airbnb gate, which contributed to some of the issues in housing. And the gag is for a lot of these get rich quick content spaces, a lot of them end up boiling down to this sense of billionaire aspiration and oftentimes worship, which I think is really weird. In spite of the inherently capitalistic nature of this type of content and general interest in it, it causes men to seek inspiration from and really tune in and listen to these people who have claimed to make it big through house flipping, through investing in stocks, through these various entrepreneurship endeavors. And again, this is not always a bad thing. These spaces are not always part of the pipeline, not always trying to breadcrumb someone through this pipeline, but more often than not, it happens to be that a lot of the men in these spaces that are being idolized, these men that have these fortunes, are making content or have these clips going around dropping tips for how people can get rich, tend to lean more conservative. And some may say that this is because conservatives just are better at making money. No, I think a lot of cases, these billionaires and people that have all this money tend to lean conservative because the conservative/Republican Party gives them more tax breaks and benefits them politically and financially in ways that the left and Democratic Party typically do not. And by allowing people and getting people to support them by saying like, you can do it too by doing these exact things that I did, it serves these oftentimes conservative billionaires' interests to continue exploiting these people, bringing them on their side and making them believe that they can have and should behave in the ways of a tax bracket that they are not currently in and oftentimes will never be in. Like you have people worshiping and seeking inspiration from Elon Musk. Like that man was born with money that some people will never make in their lives. Like you can't get inspiration from that. Like the starting point of these stories are not the same. And what happens oftentimes, what we saw, especially with this recent election, when it comes to this red-pilled financial content, that it gets men to believe that they can have this money and that they do have this money and gets them to act in ways as if they actually do. And almost as though it's a possibility and a right for them to have that same level of success by acting, voting, and believing the same things that these billionaires do, when that just simply is not the case. Like that's the reason why we saw so many people voting for an economic plan that would benefit a tax bracket that they are not currently in. Now, this last thing I want to talk about when it comes to men, specifically Gen Z men, especially when it comes to the conservative pipeline, one of the main drivers for this, and I alluded to this earlier in this video, are the streamers and are the podcasts and are the creators. And I feel like this is something that's really unique to this generation specifically. When we talk about online spaces that are male dominated and sometimes tend to lean more conservative, these things really lie in the hands of these creators, podcasters, streamers, what have you. Because for Gen Z, content is king. We've known this. And this is true no matter your gender or your political affiliation. Because as we saw testimonially from a lot of these results in the recent election, a lot of people were influenced by the content that they saw these creators make, as well as just generally the beliefs of these creators that they follow and listen to. And why this comes to more of a conservative viewpoint is because a lot of the top podcasts, a lot of the top spaces for male entertainment online do lean conservative. Like the top podcast, Joe Rogan, Joe Budden, the Impulsive podcast with Logan Paul, Jake Paul, that one white guy with the faux hawk. Like these are all spaces that are primarily for med, but also are like really conservative leaning.
I'm being so dead ass when I say this, that if you are a man and you have left leaning beliefs and you have a platform, it might be time to grab a podcast mic. Is that there's now this massive gap of what is young men's entertainment, what is entertainment for men, and that entertainment for men, that Joe Rogan, Fresh and Fit, all these places, Aiden Ross, the people they are going to find entertainment are all radicalizing them to the right. And so I feel maybe now I will grab the homies. And if you are a man on the left of the platform, you go grab the homies, and as annoying as it might seem, as stupid as it might seem, there needs to be a gap for radicalizing young men to the left.
And I think what's really drawing these men in is that these content creators are speaking to, in very layman's terms, what issues men, specifically straight, oftentimes white, men are facing in society, or what they believe they are facing in society, and validating that in ways that they felt that they needed. But the additional part that they're going is then also swaying them to be more conservative. And I think that if we want to talk about like actionable things for like of how we can move men back more to the left, is like that one piece, and having creators and podcasters still be able to do that piece of like validating the male experience, because that is important for representation. But the way that they do that and the messaging and undertones can be shifted to be more productive and to show more positive ways of masculinity in ways that just aren't bigoted and racist and problematic.
I talk about this with my friends sometimes. I'm like, in big cities where Democrats are, we can get very regional with our beliefs and like have these conversations around like communism and socialism and like Marxism. And it's like, this is like an LA conversation, girl. In the middle of Louisiana, they're not about that. They're like, why is the gas so high? Obviously there's reasons why that is attributed to like politics and why that's happening, why the Democrats have like received the brunt of like the prices are so much higher, like whatever. But it's like, I think it's cool to be a Republican right now in a crazy way. The branding is like much more inclusive. It is a wide net. Any and all are welcome to be a Trump supporter. And like, it is less judgmental amongst that.
I actually saw this other TikTok that put it very well, that like it's cooler to be conservative right now and it's cooler to be a Republican. And I feel like because it's easier and safer for a certain demographic of men, because they don't feel like they're being called out or being like villainized for their identities. And I feel like a lot of men feel this way because of the current messaging of the Democrat and liberal side, which I feel like definitely can use some changes to be more competitive and be more appealing to the general public moving forward. I feel like a way to combat this is really to have more creators, podcasters, etc., that can really tap into the male section of the internet, that can make more left-leaning positions sound more appealing and cool to the average person, more so the average white man, where we can actually allow people to learn more about and choose things that are actually more so in their interests. I think that there's just like an abundance of conservative media and talking points online, especially when it comes to podcasts. And as this one TikToker explains, like there definitely could be more podcasts that have the opposite ideology that can have the potential to be popular and influential.
This is how you fix the red pill problem in America. First thing you need to do, take the fucking gloves off. Real talk. Respectability politics, that shit is done. Number two, and I need you to listen to me very clearly, start a cult. We need blue MAGA. You cannot defeat a cult with a coalition. MAGA and them stormed the Capitol on January 6th for Donald Trump. We need some people that's at that same level without being illegal. And that might require you to start campaigning to the left again. It's okay to campaign to leftists and moderates. We're going to have to lie. Even if you don't do leftist politics, you're going to have to talk to the Number three, we need to win the misinformation and disinformation war. Elon Musk and all them red pill podcasters, they did a number on men and women under the age of 35. And y'all response was, oh, they lying. No, lie back. Even if you have a credible story, you need to gas it up and exaggerate that. Number four, midterm elections. We want new faces, new life, new energy, all that. Don't you put no old white up there. He gonna lose, I promise you.
Like I think of people like Hassan Abi, who was like one example of like a male leading figure for like a male audience. Having like more of those like different varying degrees like there are on the right and on the conservative side, I like would offer more voices so it's not just an echo chamber of one thing for the majority of people. And I say all this and then on another hand, I'm like, I don't know. That is nice, but you can't really teach someone to like respect women and people of color if they've already chosen not to. But I'm like, I guess we could still have hope out there? Question mark. I just think overall that like left-leaning people and more progressive people can do a better job at making information clearer and simpler for the everyday person. But yeah, that was a lot. I just feel like overall, based on a lot of the media that we've consumed and based on what we've seen, specifically Gen Z men aren't necessarily as progressive as maybe we all thought we were. And that's something we really need to grapple with. That's something we really need to do the work and figure out if we're okay with that. And if not, what we're gonna do to modify that in the future. That's gonna be it for this video, y'all. I wanna hear your thoughts down in the comment section below. Please keep it respectful. Please keep it cute, because I know this is a very hot button topic. Thanks again so much for watching. If you're new to the channel, definitely subscribe, leave a like, and follow me on my socials at Imurgency on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. Other than that, y'all, again, I've been Imurgency, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.